Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
Well, Joe, we got to start off by talking about what was just an amazing playoff run by the Braves, get their first World Series since 1995. I was 7 years old and I don't really remember them winning. I remember I was like the ring bearer at my cousin Haygood's wedding in Atlanta, actually, when this was going on. I was up there and I remember everybody being really engrossed in it, watching it. It was kind of like a periphery thing to this wedding, but I honestly have no memories of the games themselves. The first World Series that I remember that Atlanta played in, it wasn't the last one they were in, but it was the second to last one. And it was when they blew the 2-0 lead against the Yankees and then lost four in a row. That one's like ingrained in my mind. And then, of course, we have no World Series they even play in until now. And I think it's kind of poetic that the first World Series they made in the 90s, the worst of first year in 1991, they ended up losing it to the Twins, couldn't get it done. Now, this one with Bobby Cox, who I didn't even know was still alive until last night when they were talking about it, still watching, they do it again. They go worst to first. They have 88 wins. And with a lot of good midseason pickups with Soler, with Jock Peterson, with Rosario, those are the guys who get it done. And they get their first World Series since 1995 and the second for the Braves in their history of being in Atlanta.
That's right, Dan. And for me, it's just surreal on many levels. You go back to that 1995 team, and what was so bizarre about the great Braves teams in the 90s and early 2000s is that you could argue of the five World Series that they were in the 90s, the team that they beat, Cleveland, was actually probably the toughest challenge. And so it's really odd that they defeated them, lost the other four. And over the years, I've just gotten tired of only hearing, about the Braves having that one championship. Like you feel like they're not known, as the team that won the 95 World Series. They were known as the franchise that only won one
The
championship
lost
with
all the
all
other
those Hall
ones.
of Famers. Yes, that's the moniker that it was. And I feel so good for the Hall of Famers on that team and Bobby Cox and everybody who I think can enjoy this victory as kind of a release from that moniker. So I think that in addition to the players now celebrating it, there's also an exhale from Greg Maddux, John Smoltz, Chipper Jones, Tom Glavine, David Justice, Fred McGriff, all those guys. But as far as this team, I mean, how surreal is it that out of all the years that they've, had good teams since the year 2000, this is probably on paper one of the weaker rosters, but they just defied the odds and just had this magical run. They pressed all the right buttons with the bullpen, all the right buttons at the trade deadline. I mean, who would have thought? I was actually in Mobile visiting you and Kayla the weekend that Ronald Acuna Jr. got injured and was done for the season. I thought the Braves were done then back in July. And lo and behold, they make those moves. They get hot at the right time, and they win the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. They were showing that stat last night about how all the guys that you added at that June deadline ended up being the ones that were accounting for 10 plus RBIs. When you talk about Rosario having 12, Soler having, I think, 11 in the actual World Series, and of course, ended up being the World Series MVP. And then, of course, what Jock Peterson did. And I mean, it really was amazing. And then, you have a couple of mainstays that have been there for a while. Of course, Freddie Freeman, been there since 2010. I kind of feel like he's the new Chipper Jones when you talk about the face of the Braves franchise for a long time. And I'm glad that, I think they're going to do the best they can to hold on to him. But if for some reason they do lose him, I'm glad that he got to have a World Series with the Braves because he's been such a great representative of the Braves franchise, really kind of taken over when Chipper left off as kind of the man. And of course, Ozzy Albies, I like Albies a lot. He seems like he's such a fun guy. He's got a great attitude. He's such a versatile player too, because you think of him as the speedster and of course a really good, shortstop. But he's such a great power hitter too for someone that's his size. You would never think it. And, he's one of the ones that I'm glad to see that's been with the team for a while that could get it done. But outside of that, definitely a lot of new guys that just kind of got put together and a really great job of Snicker just assembling a roster and a lot of them in the middle of the year.
Yes, absolutely. Because you feel like some of these players may not necessarily be there for the long term, but they were the perfect fit for the rotation this season. The scary things that the Braves, regular season wins wise, may actually be better the next couple of years with the players they have coming up through the minors. They'll have also Mike Soroka, one of their co-aces will be back, hopefully from injury. So a great pitching staff alongside Max Fried, who's probably going to be a Cy Young candidate next year with how well he's been pitching. And then you bring back Acuna Jr. and those guys. But, when I look back at this team, Dan, in this series in particular, after game 5, I was really concerned going back to Houston. I did not feel good at all about game 6. I kind of felt like we were going 7 games. I thought the Astros suddenly had recaptured a lot of momentum. I thought that the Braves had missed their opportunity after Adam Duvall hit that grand slam to go up to 4-0, and then to cough that lead right back up. Like, I was really concerned. It seemed so representative of the Braves of yesteryear to have another postseason collapse of this magnitude. But lo and behold, I have to give them so much credit that Soler hit the home run. But it all started, though, in that first inning when Fried pitched out of that jam. And miraculously, he wasn't injured. Like, I thought that he'd broken his leg. Miraculously, he gets out of that, and then it was just they were in complete control the rest of the game.
Yeah, and Joe, speaking of control, I want you to talk about the amazing relief pitching that we saw from Matzek and Will Smith, especially Matzek. I know Will Smith was the one that always got the save, but I really think the unsung hero of the Braves playoff run, you'll talk about Rosario against the Dodgers, great in that series. Of course, Soler and what he did in the World Series. But every series, Matzek was the man who was just getting it done, and he barely gave up any runs. And I thought the biggest inning of the entire stretch that the Braves had was when Matzek came in, the bases were loaded, and he struck out Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, and Albert Pujols all in a row. I thought that was the biggest thing in this entire run that the Braves had. And I think that's the reason they won the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, that was huge. And, just think of so many instances in the playoffs where he was just great. In that game 3, that was such a close game last Friday night in Atlanta, he came in and shut the door down and preserved that, 1-run lead, and they win the game. Last night, he pitches 2 innings. He's the guy that they use as kind of to bridge the gap between Fried and Smith at the back end of the bullpen. And the crazy storybook thing about him, Dan, if the Braves team this year needed anything else storybook or Hollywood-esque, is that he was away from baseball for 4 or 5 years. He had one of those situations psychologically where he had to kind of find himself and had doubts about whether he could actually pitch and kind of lost his form. And he comes back the last 2 years. He's just been phenomenal and helps this team to victory.
Yeah, I thought that was a great story last night when I was hearing about that too. I mean, the only story that's better is the story of Brian Snitker being a lifer with the Braves organization. 45 years in various roles with the Braves, most of it straight through. He had a little period where he wasn't with them, but he's gotten to be with them through all their travails in the 90s of making the World Series, of losing them, of actually getting the one World Series. And then he just does it the right way. He comes up, he gets given the interim job when Freddie Gonzalez goes out in 2016, and then does well enough they give him the job, and he's just done such an excellent job. And he just seems like such a great guy, like a likable guy. He goes up there, thanks his wife for all that she's done, all the sacrifices she has. He's got a son coaching for the Astros. And I just feel like it's one of the good guys in baseball got to have his first World Series. And something like what we talk about college football all the time and with the NFL, I feel like baseball is a unique animal, and that you can do the kind of stuff that Brian Snitker does within one organization. And it might be the only sport in the world, the only professional sport where that's even possible.
Yeah, his story, kind of how he came up, is very similar to Eric Spoelstra in the NBA, because he started out like as a video intern, and he just kind of moved up through the channels. And Snitker, I think he was with the organization for 45 years. It's just unfathomable what he did, unprecedented. And I think about, everything that they accomplished with Snitker. I'm also so happy, in addition to him, I'm happy for Ron Washington, the third base coach,
Mhm.
because he was the manager on those back-to-back American League Championship Texas Ranger teams, and that second team in 2011 lost that just heartbreaker that nobody deserved to lose the way they did to the Cardinals and David Freese. And so I feel great for Ron Washington to be able to celebrate a championship as an assistant coach here.
Well, that's right, Joe. I mean, you and I are lawyers, so we always got to look at the negative of everything too. Let's go to the other side. And poor Dusty Baker. I mean, that's a guy who's been in it for forever. Also seems like one of the really good guys of baseball. And, I guess it's been 19 years since the last time that he made a World Series when he was the Giants manager. Yet again, loses. He's someone that I would personally like to see do get a World Series. I'm glad it wasn't against the Braves, but hopefully, with this Astros team he has, he can get it done one of these next few years.
I mean, they still have a good chance. I mean, if they can get Justin Verlander back, re-sign him, because it's just crazy that they made it this far without him all season. He really hasn't pitched the last 2 years due to Tommy John surgery, and kind of just figure out what they're going to do with their pitching staff. I mean, they've got the offense. They also got to figure out how they're going to replace probably Carlos Correa at shortstop. But you definitely do feel for Dusty Baker. And to me, that was one of the more intriguing parts of this matchup coming into the World Series. I thought it was cool that for the first time you had two teams in the southern United States facing off in the World Series. And then also I was like, something's got to give. You've got Dusty Baker. He hasn't won a World Series as a manager. And you've got our Braves, who are always snake bit in the playoffs. So I was like, something's got to give.
It was. And I thought it was just an excellent World Series. And I mean, I haven't watched baseball like that in a long time. And it was very enjoyable. And let me ask you this, Joe. One thing that I was thinking about last night, you think they're going to get Freddie Freeman back? I mean, I just don't. How can you let him leave? I mean, I just don't. I know that they're trying to build for the future and everything, but the guy's only 31, and I feel like he's still got 6 or 7 good years in him. And I feel like it is like Chipper Jones. They didn't let Chipper Jones go at this kind of point in his career,
Right. No, I would be stunned if he leaves. I think that they'll definitely try to lock him up. I mean, it's surprising he doesn't have a contract at this junction, but I would say actually for his agent's sake, they're probably, they got so much bargaining power right now they can use coming off, the postseason that he had and winning a championship.
That's right. And, it's going to be interesting to see which of these guys they hang on to out of the Jock Petersons and the Solars and the Rosarios. I'll say this, even though Solar was the World Series MVP, if I could only hold on to one of them, it'd be Rosario. Rosario is just amazing. The way he hits and some of the catches that he made too. In my mind, I was more scared of the Dodgers than I was anyone else. And what Rosario did in that series was the reason that we won. Him and, of course, what I'll talk about with Matzek. But if I could only hold on to one out of the three, it would be Rosario.
Well, the good thing about him, Soler is more of a DH. And so, if you don't have the DH in the National League, we'll see if they change the rule next year. You don't necessarily have as much of a place for him long term. But Rosario can play left field. He's very athletic. And he had a great year 2 years ago with the Twins. He hit 42 home runs, but he had been injured this season. And so when the Braves traded for him, it was basically an afterthought. And he really didn't get to play until like the end of August and 1st of September. And so, yeah, he has a lot of upside going forward. But the last thing I just kind of say about the culmination of this team, Dan, I talked about how unexpected this championship was, but it definitely is a sweet and satisfying championship for us Braves fans.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think it's, really, we'll get into this more later when we talk about monkeys, but really getting the monkey off your back. Because, I mean, we talk about all the failings that they've had, especially like 4 World Series where they were considered the team. I mean, they were the team in the 90s, and yet they could only win one. I mean, they weren't quite as bad as the Buffalo Bills losing 4 Super Bowls in a row, but it was very similar in a lot of ways. They got the one, but they lost all the rest of them. And this is one where they had nowhere near the talent. There wasn't Smoltz, Glavine, and Greg Maddux running out there. You didn't have Brian Klesko, Javi Lopez, Fred McGriff. You didn't have those kind of players on this team. And yet, just all of them worked so well together. They believed in each other, and they took out some giants. And I mean, I think it's one of the greatest underdog stories we've seen in sports, period, the fact that they won that World Series. In my mind, the only time I can ever remember a team in professional sports that was so, I wouldn't say bereft of talent, but just kind of an everyman type team winning it was the '04 Detroit Pistons.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing in baseball I can think of, I would say like when the Florida Marlins won both of their titles, it was kind of out of nowhere like that. Outside of that, it's really hard to think of many examples.
Well, Joe, speaking of, the Hollywood stories, what do we got going on with the Saints right now? This one's been a little bit of a horror fest in October, of course. On Halloween Day, we lose Jameis Winston for the season with a torn ACL. And of course, I thought Simeon came in and played a very good game to close out a win that we had, against Tom Brady and the Bucs. Yet again, the Saints just continue their domination over Tom Brady during the regular season. But, the question is, where do they turn now? I mean, is Simeon the guy going forward? I know that we have an injury right now, of course, to our BYU quarterback. Do you think that he's going to come back in and be the starter, or what do you think's going? What do you think Sean Payton's going to do now?
Everything that I've read and heard, they're going to go with the rotation of Simeon probably as the starter, and Hill kind of in the same role that he's been in because he's supposed to be back, I think, from injury this week because he didn't play last week. And then they're bringing up Ian Book, I think, from like the practice squad as the number 3 quarterback, the Notre Dame rookie. So I think that's what they'll do for this season because we did not see them go out and trade for a quarterback yesterday. Thought that might be a possibility. They didn't do that. So I think they'll hold serve for what they have, try to get through this season with the roster that they have, and then next year try to probably bring in a new quarterback because the roster that they have, I mean, they're a team that should make the playoffs, but everything right now kind of out of necessity is going to be predicated on defense at this point.
Oh, well, definitely. I mean, the good news is they have arguably the best defense in the NFL. But yeah, that's a scary proposition right now. I thought Simeon, he played with a lot of heart, but you could see that the talent's not there. I mean, he's not a guy that should be a starting quarterback in the NFL. Now he could, he's going to do a lot. There's definitely no lack of effort. I kind of look at it as like a Stetson Bennett type thing. Maybe if he can get a locker room behind him with the kind of defense the Saints have, you could have a Stetson Bennett type effect. I think that's kind of the best we can hope for. And I hate it because the defense is playing so great right now. And I just, in my mind, the last couple of years, all you and I talked about is there were so many great quarterbacks coming out in the draft, and the Saints never went out and got a single one of them. And let's say they do this plan that you have right now. They hold serve with Simeon, put in Taysom Hill periodically, and you bring up Ian Book. None of those guys are gonna be Pro Bowl quarterbacks. At least not what I see. And drafting a quarterback this year, what is there? I don't think this is a great year to be going out drafting a quarterback. In my mind, if you were going to do that, last year was the year to do that. When you had so many great players, you had Trevor Lawrence, you had Zach Wilson, even people like Kyle Trask, Justin Fields. I mean, there were so many. And this year, I mean, I guess Matt Corral is really one of your only guys that you see as probably a future Pro Bowler in the NFL. And the Saints aren't going to be drafting that high. They're going to have to get rid of a lot of stuff to get someone like Matt Corral. So I feel like, they yet again put themselves in a box where they're going to have to go in and get a free agent veteran off the market.
That's what I think they'll end up probably doing, or making a trade for some type of quarterback in the offseason. And I should have also added, you can't, I guess, completely rule out Phillip Rivers returning this year and finishing the season. I mean, there's some, speculation about that being a possibility, as we talked about before the show, with his high school team finishing their season where he was the head coach this year over in Alabama. But I think that, don't be surprised if you see Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis go after somebody. It wouldn't shock me if they could go after like a Derek Carr to be the quarterback next year. Somebody like that. I think that they'll want to be aggressive for a reputable starter because they've got kind of everything else in place.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I think that'd be a good move. And, part of me would be interesting to see Phillip Rivers. Of course, he's from Alabama. He just got done with his first season coaching St. Michael's High School, the Catholic high school over in Fairhope, Alabama, and did a good job. They went 6-3. They did make the playoffs. Actually, Kayla and I went out one night in downtown Fairhope, and we actually saw him. It was after his first game coaching, and we didn't talk to him because he looked like he was celebrating with his wife. But a lot of people were coming and going up and just gushing over the fact that there was Philip Rivers there. So I don't know. I think he seems like he's pretty happy, and he's got kind of a good gig right now. His wife is a Fairhope girl, and he's back to where she's at, and maybe I could see it if it would be only for this season. And I know he's expressed interest on the radio, but I just find that to be a very small likelihood.
Yeah, it's very unlikely. I still think at the end of the day, they'll stay with what they have right now and see how far they can go. And I still think, if you're beating the Buccaneers and you look at some of the wins they've had this year against the Packers, I mean, these are just crazy good wins, wins that we never would have dreamed coming into the season. And so I think that they're still a team where their ceiling could be the second weekend of the playoffs. Like, I think they could make it to the divisional round. It just depends on, how well Simeon can transform into this offense.
And, we'll see. That was just the first chance that he had last week. And he was the guy that was a starter at the Broncos for a period of time. He's a Northwestern quarterback, so he's smart. Pat Fitzgerald always had very good, intelligent quarterbacks. And, he's been waiting his turn, so we'll see what he can do. And then we also have Ian Brooks. We got a very Ivy League-esque quarterback group right there with a Notre Dame grad and a Northwestern grad right there, the Ivy League of the Midwest, that is.
Absolutely.
All right, when we come back, we're going to recap the games that we had from last week, including my Auburn Tigers' victory over Joe's Ole Miss Rebs, and it was a very tense game for my household. And we'll talk about some of the other games that we had last week. And you can check out all of our episodes on Spotify. And the last few weeks, you can check out our new episodes that we have on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Jan and Joe Sports Show YouTube channel and catch our new videos. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show and like us on Facebook and our Facebook fan page, the Dan and Joe Sports Show fan page. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.